just, Mr. Ansari, I'm just trying to understand how it's working across the country. And it's really bizarre. You know, for example, here in Mumbai, initially the civic body said we're not going to get vaccine doses. Then they somehow managed to get some from the manufacturers. The state government managed to get about 3 lakh doses, they said. And on late 30th April night, they said, no, you know, we will have some on 1st of April. The vaccination slots on the app actually opened at 12 in the night. And they filled up whatever few hundred slots were there. They filled up obviously within a couple of hours at 12 in the night. The second day was no better. Last night at 9 p.m., you know, information came about that there are available slots, that slots have opened. Is it that haphazard even in the national capital? It amazes me that 80% of the state governments don't have vaccines right now, but private hospitals do.
It's the same in the national capital, and I'm afraid much worse in the countryside. The state from which both Vinay and myself hail, especially in the rural areas of Uttar Pradesh, this is a nightmare without end. Bodies are piling up. Forget vaccination, there are no oxygen cylinders. People don't have access to life-saving injection, hospital beds, oxygen cylinders. And the moment you raise this, you're threatened with, you run the risk of either your property being seized by the state or you being hauled up in the National Security Act or under the Gangster Act. So this is what the people are up against. Not just the inefficiency of the state, but also the authoritarianism of the state. They are just up against it. An oxygen cylinder in Lucknow in black is going for over 35,000 rupees. There are no beds available. And if that is what is happening in Lucknow or Delhi, imagine what is happening in the countryside. I know of a person from my village. He contracted COVID. He went to the district hospital in Ghazipur. There was no help available. He tried contacting Varanasi, the first decent hospital, BHU. There were no beds, no oxygen available. They tried driving him 3.5, 4 hours to Patna. He died on the way. So this is the kind of problems that the people are facing. It's an existential crisis. All pretenses, you know, forget of being a superpower. We are not even a half. If we are superpower, then we need to redefine the meaning of superpower. We become superpowers. Prime examples of inefficiency. The bottom has been knocked out of this hollow claims that we've been making. And like Vinay said, you know, the easiest thing in the world is to pat your own back. Everybody is a legend in their own mind. And we seem to be better at, worse at it than anybody else. We just convinced ourselves that everything is hunky-dory. And even now, when people are dying by the minute, we are not willing to accept. If you're not willing to accept the problem, how are you going to solve it? If Delhi and Mumbai are bad, what is happening in the countryside is worse, is absolutely unimaginable. This is a gigantic crisis, a crisis that we've never faced before, and God alone knows when we'll come out of it.
Yes, and you know, specifically we're seeing now few states that were already in a crisis and more states getting there. But T.S. Sudhir, at some point, do you think we need to centralize, get a handle on this? First phase was all centrally handled. All the policy decisions were made centrally. The task force was coordinating centrally and then with individual states and district authorities. But after the first wave, we kind of gave the command and the control to individual states. Is it still something that we need to continue with, or is it back time again for the central government to, you know, get together and take charge of this situation? Because states individually are grappling since there is no coordination with others.
Well, the problem, Tanvi, is that there is over-centralization of almost everything, whether it deals with the supply of oxygen or whether it deals with the larger policy issues. Look at what the former Health Minister of Telangana said. He said there was absolutely no input, no information from the center about the second wave of corona. So in that sense, the states were also grappling in the dark, groping in the dark, because they had no information from the center, no input from the center on how exactly to deal with it. We used to talk about, you know, how the next next war will be fought over water. We are witnessing a war being fought over vaccines, a war being fought over oxygen. And we had political parties going to different elections, be it Bihar earlier and now even in Bengal, saying that we will give free vaccines to everybody. Everybody is still in the very freebie mode. People are not talking about whether there are enough vaccines available to vaccinate so many number of people in every state. And that's essentially the crux of the problem. People deal with politicians, our political leaders, our leadership, our political leadership deals essentially only with promises and saying that, okay, we have made this grandiose promises without actually looking at how the policies are to be formulated. Today, when Adar Poonawalla says that he is getting threats from different chief ministers, from very powerful men, I can understand that because he is located in Pune. You have a Bharat Biotech which is based in Telangana. So different chief ministers, different political parties, different governments are putting pressure on these vaccine manufacturers that they need to give a lion's share of the vaccines to XYZ different states. What happens to states, say for instance in the northeast? Would they be able to put similar amount of pressure? What happens to Lakshadweep? What happens to Andaman and Nicobar Islands? Those are the kind of areas which will suffer even more, and that's the problem. You mentioned the two cases coming in from Andhra Pradesh. Do you know from the 5th of May, Andhra Pradesh government is going to conduct the examinations for class 11 and 12, the intermediate first year and second year, for over 10 lakh students, 10 lakh students between May 5 and May 23rd. Does the Andhra Pradesh government really have to do this when class 10 exams have been cancelled by both the CBSE as well as the ICSE Council? Class 11 students have been promoted in most states. Where is really the necessity in the middle of this raging pandemic, when there is a short supply in hospitals as well as for oxygen cylinders, to actually conduct examinations for over 10 lakh students? And I know it for a fact that many students either have a COVID positive patient in the family or have tested positive themselves. What are they going to do? You are playing with the minds of the students, the 16, 17-year-old students. Their parents are in trauma, despite the High Court requesting the government to reconsider its decision, despite the opposition parties also making a plea. The Andhra Pradesh government is adamant about going ahead with the intermediate examinations. That is the crux of the problem. The political parties, the government still haven't realized the gravity of the problem on the ground.
Yes, and this last minute decision making, like you gave the example, the state government being adamant on going ahead with the exams makes absolutely no sense. But of course, they will wait till the last minute before they change their mind. And in some cases, it's difficult to explain why you're cancelling this while you still continue with elections, whether it's in Uttar Pradesh or Telangana or even Karnataka, where all the politicians have been campaigning for civic body elections and panchayat polls. Ms. Ansari, you wanted to make a point?
Yes, and we just don't seem to be learning our lessons. We are still going ahead, or were going ahead till yesterday, with panchayat elections in Uttar Pradesh. What on earth is the necessity? Would the heavens have fallen if we had stopped? Hundreds of people have died. There's this heart-wrenching video of a pregnant school teacher who was put on election poll duty. She had apparently earlier pleaded with people not to put her there. They had put her on duty and she was lying on the floor, wriggling on the floor. This mad lust for power, irrespective of what the human cost is. I mean, this is criminal. That people have to be held accountable for this. They must be made to pay for this, those who are taking this decision.
Absolutely, and I don't know if that's happening because the authorities seem to be in another level of denial. I mean, look at what has happened, Mr. Ansari, with the Election Commission itself. When the Election Commission gets pulled up, and some very, very scathing comments are made by the Madras High Court, rather than actually taking a cue from that on what now can be done, the Election Commission is going from Madras High Court to the Supreme Court now. They have moved the Supreme Court, challenging the observations made by the Madras High Court, where it was said that ECI should be put on murder charges probably, as political parties flouted norms in rallies and EC did nothing about it. The Election Commission is still in denial mode, Mr. Javed Ansari, by saying this is uncalled for, this is blatant, this is disparaging. How can you say these things about us at a time when counting is still left and you have so much of work still to do, even if you say you didn't care about it for at least the last 2 months?
there's a whole lot of people I know, and I've been speaking to, who believe the Madras High Court was not strong enough. Rather than just past observations, they should have actually just asked I don't know if it is possible, but the sentiment is that they should have asked Election Commission to shut shop. Because what the Election Commission has done by not enforcing by not discharging its duties is, again, people have lost their lives. Everybody is directly or indirectly responsible. When you don't take a decision or you take the wrong decision, there are consequences, and people pay the price for it. And in this case, people are paying with their lives.
Vinay, would you like to come in
The
on
Election
this?
Commission should consider itself lucky that there were only oral observations made against it.
Correct. And even
I wish
on oral
the
observations.
Madras High Court had gone further and taken some concrete steps.
Yeah, and please see what they are doing post that.
Yes, exactly.
They first went to the High Court in Madras again to petition them, saying, please direct the media not to report oral observations. And
yeah, because that is that media coverage is actually damaging the image, not the lack of action by EC.
And when the Madras High Court did not listen to that, they've now moved to the Supreme Court. So I don't understand this. This is we are not getting our priorities wrong. Right now, the priority is not to attack the media because they mentioned something that the judges said so in court. And I don't see why that is less important. This is, to get lost in technicalities of whether something is written in an order or mentioned orally. Why would a judge mention it orally if he or she is not feeling strongly about it? And in courts, judges routinely say things openly. Now, yes, sometimes the oral observations are contextual, but in this case, the context was very clear. The context was that you have a situation where the crisis has worsened while the process was on, and should the Election Commission have taken more decisive and stronger measures to ensure that everything happens a little more safely. And obviously that was not done, and that was causing anguish to the court. Instead of understanding the sentiment behind why the court was saying it, you have the whole machinery trying to ensure that there is no reportage or something like this because it is so quote-unquote demoralizing. I'm afraid the act of some institution getting demoralized is slightly less important than hundreds and hundreds of people dying every minute. There are families who are getting destroyed, and people are being... see what's happening in Uttar Pradesh, the same state that, Javed and I come from. You have a local self-government election, the panchayat elections, going on merrily for 4 phases, where the Teachers Association is petitioning one after the other. There was a newspaper report which the High Court in Allahabad took cognizance of and said there are 135 deaths. Then the Teachers Association released a list which said actually the number is 700. Whatever the actual figure is, the fact of the matter is that the staff there is being forced to do something in a situation where people are very scared of getting out of their homes, and why should they be put in harm's way? That's an election that we can do without for 2 months.
And even when that case was again heard in the court, there was very strong, vehement defense of steps being taken and how it was organized, complete denial of what the ground reality was. And of course, because the elections were by then already done, and this was more about the counting, the Supreme Court then allowed them to go ahead with the counting process because the damage largely was already done during election time. Horrifying visuals that emerged even from the UP Panchayat polls at a time when people are, queuing and fighting to get oxygen and paying such high prices for the state to go ahead with panchayat elections. It just goes on to show how the political dispensation in our country, along with maybe some institutions, are completely disconnected with the reality and refuse to accept it. And what will happen now...
Tanvi, if I may come in for a minute.
Yes, Sudhir, I was coming to you, is that once the elections are done, then all of them will announce lockdown.
Yes, in fact, you mentioned about the panchayat elections in UP. I don't think any other election body, the state election commission, which are in charge of the local body polls, the panchayat polls, the municipal election polls, they really have learnt a lesson from what happened in Bengal and from what the election commission was accused of doing by the Madras High Court. You had the 7 municipal elections in 7 different towns of Andhra Pradesh, including Warangal, Khammam and Siddipet, on the 30th of April, despite the state election commission, because according to the constitution, they need the concurrence of the state government if they need to postpone or cancel the elections. The state government did not agree to that because the Telangana Rashtra Samiti here believes that they can win these elections. So that becomes more important. Even if you want to put the lives of so many people in these 7 towns and cities of Telangana at risk, they went ahead with the elections. The counting will be done tomorrow. So the political parties do not learn any lessons. If power is available, power is more important than life in most parts of Warangal and Khammam. And Warangal in particular has seen a massive jump ever since the campaigning started. So expect the worst from the city of Warangal in the coming few days, and things are not going to look pretty. The health minister, interestingly, has been sacked in Telangana. The chief minister is now holding the health portfolio himself, not because of reasons that he was not doing his job well. In fact, Itla Rajender, the health minister, was on the ground. He was one of the more visible faces of the government on the ground, but because of other reasons of corruptions and more importantly, more of political reasons. So that's the kind of state of affairs where politics takes precedence, power takes precedence over life and over matters of actually saving people on the ground.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to ask both of you, Mr. Javed and Sudhir, to stay on with us. Vinay and I will just take a short break. We'll be back with lots more. Today, we're going to go non-stop with COVID, just as we have in the last many weeks as the second wave hit us. Stay with Mira now.